absolute best to provide you guys with as much value as I possibly can. I do have some questions here, so I'll run through them. There are 15. And if by the end we have a little bit more time, then we can open it up to anybody else who still has a few more questions to ask about how they can use emotional intelligence to become better students, better professionals, to get a job, to move on and transition to the next phase of your life. So let's jump in, shall we? Now, the first question is emotional intelligence qualities that employers value. So how can you demonstrate these EI skills during a job interview? Would you put these on your resume? So you absolutely can put something like emotional intelligence on your resume. You have to remember that emotional intelligence is an umbrella term that refers to many different skills. It's not just one thing. So you want to be specific about, number one, what skill are you talking about? Is it an ability to be self-aware, to regulate emotions? Is it a social intelligence thing? Is it a self-regard confidence thing? So first thing you want to do is outline specifically what skill you're referring to. The next thing is the way that you demonstrate your emotional intelligence in an interview can vary. The first thing is confidence, the way that you're presenting yourself, the way that you're speaking, the way that you're able to convey and communicate your ideas with clarity demonstrates that you're a confident person, that you have some degree of control over your stress responses. So that's one way that you can demonstrate it. But really, the best thing for you to do is to actually work on cultivating your emotional intelligence outside of the interview space. And so really allowing it to become a lifestyle. And we'll talk a little bit more about some strategies to do that later on, so that when you're in the interview, ask you specific questions about how you deal with yourself in different scenarios and how you deal with people in different scenarios, your questions will automatically reflect your emotional intelligence because you've already taken the time to cultivate, which is very different from when I'm in the interview, how do I demonstrate emotional intelligence? On the contrary, we want for you to already be emotionally intelligent, and that just come through by the way that you answer your questions and the way that you describe how you would deal with different situations and challenges. Another thing to be mindful of is that recruiters are now taking a very different approach because many of them are looking for emotional intelligence to hiring. For example, there's a company that my friend just did an interview for, and this obviously wasn't in the landscape that we're in now. It was about 6 months ago. But what happened was they had him go out and just spend regular time with the team that he would be working with if he was successful on the job. And they literally just went out to have coffee. They just had conversation, and there was no talk or conversation about work. It was just a get to know you session. And this was an interview. So a lot of interviewers are now doing things like this and moving you into social settings to see how you interact socially. That is a great example to demonstrate some of your emotional intelligence skills. And again, you will have wanted to cultivate these skills, right? You want to have cultivated these skills beforehand so that when you're in the scenario, in the situation, you naturally demonstrate them. So let's pop on to the next one. So do you have a rule of thumb to discover what type of workplaces value EI as opposed to the ones that only seem to value the bottom line? So that's an amazing question, by the way. If you're asking that question, you're definitely on the right track. Now, what you want to pay attention to as far as employers that value emotional intelligence are employers that value people, because people are driven by emotions. And you can tell what employers value people by the ones that place a significant emphasis on culture. When I say culture, I don't mean that they've just, put all the fancy words on the walls and all the slogans and they have, the vision statement and values. I mean companies that literally invest in bringing their culture to life. How do you know which companies invest in bringing their culture to life? Well, there are several organizations that are responsible for identifying this, and there are top companies and their culture. So top companies that have great culture, there are lists that you can find online. LinkedIn has a fantastic one every single year. They do a top 25 list of great company cultures. You know that those companies invest and that their people matter, therefore emotional intelligence matters. I would say that that's a great place to start, but I know that there are also other organizations that put together very similar lists to rank the company culture. And so you want to pay attention to those companies that are really heavily invested in that. Transitioning on, how can we recognize if we are being emotionally intelligent towards others? If not, how can we exercise our emotional intelligence towards others? Another fantastic question. So really what you're asking in this question is about several different emotional intelligence skills. The first one and the main one here is empathy. And empathy simply deals with your ability to have insight into the experience of someone else. So it's your ability to be aware of what somebody is feeling, what emotions might be arising for them, and what someone may be thinking at any given moment, and then to use that information to tailor your communication towards them. So if I'm being emotionally intelligent towards others and I can recognize that, it's speaking to my ability to be able to empathize with them. So then we have to ask, how do I build my capacity to be able to empathize? And the answer is really simple. You want to start by looking at all of the interactions that you have and asking yourself, how is this interaction occurring to the other person? The intention here is very important because you don't want it to be from the intention of, from the place of insecurity, which is, I really just want for them to feel a certain way about me. So you don't want it to come from that place. Where you want it to come from is a genuine intent to understand what their view is that really goes beyond your own personal ego. It's a desire, it's a curiosity into what is truly happening for someone else. When you naturally come into a state of empathy, what happens is you start to become curious about that person's experience, and so you start to ask a lot of questions. So when you look at your interactions, if you're doing 75%, 85% of the talking, you're likely not opening up enough of an opportunity for empathy, which is you understanding somebody else's view. You're likely blocking that by how much you're sharing. So one of the things that you can look at is how much talking do you do in your interactions? And when you are talking, are you asking questions or are you making statements? If you're asking questions, that means that you're seeking to understand somebody else's view. And the better that you get at asking questions is the more that you can understand someone else. And when you're coming from a place of understanding, then you're coming from truly an emotionally intelligent place. So to summarize that one, you want to ask yourself, how are you coming across to other people? When somebody leaves your presence, so you just finished having a conversation with someone, interacting with them, you can ask yourself, did that person leave in a better place than when they first started talking to me? Or did they leave in a worse place than when they started talking to me? And then you can reflect on how you approached those conversations, right? Did you complain? Did you talk about a bunch of negative things? Did you help them? Did you support them? Were you degrading towards them, right? What was your orientation in that interaction? All of these questions can help you to approach relationships more emotionally intelligent, with more emotional intelligence. All right, let's move on to the next one. How do you develop your social intelligence and create meaningful relationships if you don't have many connections? So if you don't have many connections, you're limiting your opportunity to be able to develop social intelligence in the first place. So what you need to do is create more opportunities for you to get out there and to socialize. Right now is obviously not necessarily the best opportunity for that on one end, but it is on the other end because you can still reach out and network digitally, virtually. You can connect with people, you can start conversations, right? So what I would encourage you to do is to broaden your network. Think about what it is that you're looking to accomplish. Do you have an interest? Do you have an area of study? Do you have a hobby? Whatever that is, you have to understand that there is an ecosystem, there is a group, there is an environment of people that are solely focused on that one particular thing that you can engage with. And once you start engaging with that group, you'll start to gain an idea of what those people are all about, and you can build your network with people who have similar interests than you do. In that experience is where you'll have the opportunity to then develop your social skills, because you'll be around people, you'll be at social events, you'll actually be in a social setting. And so you can challenge yourself to engage in conversation, to start a conversation, right? To ask people what are their interests, all these kinds of things. That's where the development will actually happen. So to kind of circle that one around, the way that you develop your social intelligence is by increasing the number of connections that you have. And you do that by widening your network. So let's pop on to the next one. What ways do you cope with mental health during your undergrad years. So when I went back to actually become educated in what I do, I was not your age. I actually did everything backwards. And so for me, really what you're asking is essentially, how do you deal with stress, but more specifically stress when you're under pressure, which includes not only when you're studying, but when you're on the job. If you're an athlete, it also includes when you're out there on the field or on the court, right? Stress is stress, no matter which way you're approaching it. And the way that you deal with it, number one, is by recognizing the stress. You have to be able to see it in order to be able to manage it. And you have to ask yourself, what are some really simple strategies, tools, techniques that you can use to relieve the stress? For me, it's meditation. Meditation helps a lot. That's how I relieve my stress. That's how I get back to ground zero. It's how I recenter myself. It's how I find balance. I also find that reading things that I'm genuinely interested in helps me to be able to calm my mind and, again, reduce the stress. The way that I eat has a huge impact on my stress levels. When I'm eating a lot of fast food or when I'm eating a lot of takeout, I'm a lot more receptive and susceptible to stressful situations, and I tend to become more stressed than when I'm eating healthy, when I'm eating light, when I'm staying hydrated, right? Or when I'm not getting enough sleep is also another trigger for stress. So you have to recognize when you're feeling stress, and then you have to look at some really simple strategies and techniques to be able to manage it. Now, there are some questions later on about some of these things that might be causing stress. For example, your grades. And so I'm going to kind of carry this question through to some of the other ones as I transition. So we'll hold that thought and we'll come back to that in a very different way. The next one, how do you identify your core values? This is a great question, because really what it means is you're starting to ask yourself deeper questions about what's driving you, what's motivating you, right? And the way that you do this really starts with self-awareness. So you have to almost, take a step away from the outer world. We're very distracted. We're very influenced externally. You have to go inward, and you have to start asking yourself deep, meaningful questions like, what actually drives me and motivates me? What gets me going? What am I passionate about? What are the things that I'm unwilling to compromise on? What are the things that matter for me in my life? Is it relationships? Right? Is it art? Is it communication? Is it having deep, meaningful relationships? Is it having exceptional experiences? Like, you want to start by asking yourself, what actually drives you? What motivates you in life? What moves you? What are some of the things that help you to make really tough decisions in your life? What do you default to? And the reason why I say it's an internal process is because you have to literally look at yourself and start asking yourself these questions to start revealing some of the things that matter to you and some of the things that might be a core value. So I'll give you an example from me. One of the things that is, a core value for me is self-mastery, right? Understanding myself and moving the needle as far as how I can become better at what I do, how I can show up in different ways, in better ways, is something that motivates me in all facets, in all areas of my life. And so once I started to ask myself, okay, well, what matters to me? For example, having conversations like this, for example, supporting other people with emotional intelligence and self-awareness, then it helped me to identify, okay, well, those things are important for me to do for others because I find them important to do for myself. And because they're important to do for myself, I know that it's a core value. It's something that I reflect on. It's something that I come back to in my life. When things are not going well, when I mess up, when I make a mistake, right? That core value helps me to say to myself, instead of, I'm a failure, or why didn't I do it right? Or, somebody else would have done it better. I can then default to, how can I develop through this? How can I become a better individual? How can I improve or enhance my skill set? Or how can I develop my craft through this experience? So that's an example of a core value that I have, self-mastery, and it helps me to be able to look at and navigate the world, especially when things are increasingly challenging. And the way that you identify a core value is by asking yourself what matters to you, what drives you. And it doesn't have to be something like self-mastery. It can be integrity. right? It can be clarity. Clarity might be something that drives and motivates you. It might be important for you to be able to see things clearly and accurately in life so that you can make more informed decisions. It might be health and wellness, right? And that will then inform the way that you eat, the kind of lifestyle that you have. So core values can be anything. The more important part here is that you start asking yourself these questions so that you can start to look at some of the things that you do value and then refine it over time, because it will change, as you grow, as you develop. You know what I mean? The processes and the things that you value will become refined in time. So I hope that helps to provide a little bit of context into core values. Next question. Question number 7. How do I know which one of my thoughts will lead to the purpose of my life or divert me away from it? And that's a great question, and it has a really simple answer, although it's easier said than done. The way that you know that is by asking yourself, how does that thought make me feel? And if that thought is giving you feelings of insecurity, feelings of fear, feelings of wanting to shut down and close down and disengage, then you know right away, just by connecting the thought to the emotion that's coming up, that that's not driving you towards a positive place. So it's not taking you towards your desire. If, on the other hand, you have a thought, and it's always with integrity, of course, the next thing that I'm about to say, if you have a thought and you ask yourself, again, how does it feel? And you feel a sense of passion, you feel a sense of being driven, a sense of being motivated, a sense of being excited, enthused. There's just a positivity, a joy that comes from that thought or that idea, of course, always with integrity. Then you know that that's moving you towards an ideal future. It's moving you towards becoming your most ideal self. So the answer to this question is, when you have the thought, look at what emotion that thought is causing to arise within you. And if that emotion is positive, generally speaking, you're moving in the right direction. If that emotion is negative, generally speaking, you're not moving towards the right direction. Always with integrity, and there are no absolutes, so you have to still take it case by case. All right, transitioning on. How do you keep yourself motivated when you are aware of what you should do, but can't get yourself to act on it? So when I find myself in a mode where I'm aware of what I need to do, but I can't find myself acting on it, I have to ask myself, is this thing connected to my core values? Is this thing connected to who it is that I want to be? Am I driven and am I motivated by this thing? Am I passionate about this thing? So for you as a student, you have to ask yourself about the meaning, the purpose behind what it is that you're doing. You're studying something, and so because you're studying something, you want to be able to graduate, and then you want to be able to transition into a career. So you have to ask yourself, how clear is that process for you? And how deeply connected to what it is that how deeply connected are you to what it is that you're doing? How engaged are you? Now, keep in mind that there are always going to be days that are off days where you just don't have it, or you don't have the same level of energy and enthusiasm that you normally do. Those are normal days. Those days require more discipline. And what I mean by that is you have motivation and you have discipline. Motivation kind of gets you over a hump. It gets you over a little bit of a lull. And it's great when you're already generally motivated towards a goal, whereas there are things that need to be done in life that you're just not going to do, that just require discipline, right? You must do them. In order to be successful in your course, for example, you have to study, right? And for that, you have to cultivate a sense of discipline, which is an ability to do things that need to be done that you do not necessarily want to do. And it's a very useful skill in life. I'm lucky that I get to do this kind of work, and I love doing this kind of work, but there are still a bunch of tasks around it that I don't necessarily love. There's the prep work, there's the admin task, there's all the numbers and the structure. Those things require discipline. So what helps me is to cultivate a sense of discipline by consciously doing things that are a little bit challenging to do and doing them consistently. You can build and develop that, by going to the gym. You can build and develop that by having a study regimen that you stick to each and every day. You can build a sense of, discipline in so many different ways. And then the other piece to that is sometimes you need a bit of a kick of motivation, right? Just to get you over the hump. And I like to motivate myself usually by taking action. When I go out and I run and I actually get physical and get mobile, I tend to be more oriented towards action. So that's something that really helps me. I also find that consuming healthy content for your mind is great for staying motivated. And what do I mean by that? We're all consumers of media content. We have Netflix, we have YouTube. You have to think about what kind of media you're consuming. Ask yourself that question. Look at your YouTube history, look at your Netflix history. Is it material and content that is going to engage you, motivate you, get you to think deeper, bigger, get you to challenge yourself, get you to open up the possibilities? Or is it really just a bunch of mindless junk, right? So you got to look at that and leverage entertainment as a way to motivate, right? There are podcasts, there are great YouTube shows. Some that I would recommend for you guys right off the jump is Impact Theory. It's a YouTube show with Tom Bilyeu. Highly recommend that. I would also recommend London Real. It's another YouTube interview show. Another one is The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes, another great YouTube show that I know is also a podcast. These are great materials to keep your mind in a very motivated headspace. Okay, so I hope that helped to give you some clarity on that one. Now, we've only got 5 minutes left. I'm not going to get through all of these, but I do want to get to a few that I noticed were connected and see if we can kind of tie them all together. So first one here is, how do you know when to stop doing things and regulate your personal boundaries? So learning to rest, or when less is more. So this comes down to identifying what state you're in at any given moment. And again, it's a self-awareness piece, right? So you have to be watching yourself, looking at how you're feeling throughout the day. And you can do that by asking questions like, what are my energy levels like right now? If you really want to reflect on it in an effective way, you can set timers throughout the day, and that timer can have that question. And when that timer goes off, let's say every 3-4 hours, you literally ask yourself that question, or you can write down the answer. Now, the reason why that's important is because you need to be able to identify what your energy levels are, and then you need to be able to adjust accordingly, and you need to be able to adapt accordingly. So if you're very burnt out, if you're at the limit and you have all of this work to do, you have all these papers due, all of these kinds of things, you have to realize that you're not going to be effective if you're burnt out. And a big part of resilience, which is dealing with stressful and challenging situations, is in how you recover. So you need to be able to take your mind away from the work and recover from it. Sleep is included in that, but also doing activities that have nothing to do with your work and studies, so that you can then come back to it with a refreshed head and a refreshed mind. Never compromise your health, your mental well-being, in order to get more done, because in the long term, you're actually going to end up getting less done. So I'm going to pop in here and do one more question. And these questions were actually quite connected. And the question is, how does one not get attached to your grades and not let it define you in your career? So what you need to understand is this. Now, grades are important, of course, because you need to be successful in your course and they're a marker of learning, but you need to look at grades not in terms of who you are as a human being. They're not a reflection of your inherent value as a human. They're simply a reflection of how you performed in that moment and the areas where you need to focus in order to develop your learning. It should be used as a tool simply to do that one thing. And so if you get a bad grade, when you look at it that way, instead of saying, oh my goodness, I'm such a bad person, I'm terrible, I'm a stupid human being, and going into that place of insecurity, you start asking yourself, okay, where are my opportunities for learning, for growth, for development? Where did I hit the mark? And invest your energy in that direction. So don't identify with grades as far as your identity, because they don't have any true connection to who you are and your value as a human. Identify instead as being a learner and being someone who is willing to grow, develop, and learn what they need to learn in order to be successful. And if you can focus in that area, then you'll take away some of the pressures that come with a low grade, because low grades happen. The other thing is you have to put it into context and recognize, like in 15, 20 years, you're never going to remember what you got on that exam or what you got on that paper. I remember none of my grades, none of my marks, right? What mattered was the attitude towards my grades. And what also mattered, and I really want you guys to think about this, what also mattered was the skills that I developed through the process of school. What are those skills? The ability to be able to plan your work, the ability to be punctual, the ability to be able to work collaboratively with teams, the ability to be able to do research. These are all life skills. These are the things that you need to be focused on developing, not the grade. The grade is an end result based on a behavior. And so if you don't like the grade, you have to look at the behavior that caused that grade and shift the behavior so that you get a grade that's more reflective of what you're truly capable of. But you have to realize that your self-esteem is best invested in being identified as a learner than somebody who gets whatever grade. So we're right on the money here, 2:30. I really hope that you guys found this valuable. Thank you so much for bringing me back. I can't tell you how much it means. And I look forward to another connection with you. Please, if you haven't already, connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jamelle Lindo, JAMELLELINDO. You can also visit my website if you want to connect with me there as well and learn more about my work. It's my name, JamelleLindo.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jamelle, for that. That was really a half hour packed full of great information and advice. So appreciate you coming back and sharing your expertise with our students once more. I encourage everybody to follow up with Jamelle on LinkedIn, like he said. And yeah, we've had such great feedback from your keynote too. So many people have come back and said how useful it's been. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us again today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, keep up. And thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to end up the session now. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Take care.